Now that the summer transfer window is closed, I wanted to rank every Premier League club's window as they embark on their new campaigns. To rank the teams, I considered quality of the players brought in and lost, how each squad is constructed for the current season, financial implications, and how the transfer window impacts each club's long-term prospects. Let's get into it. 20th, Newcastle. Financial constraints have really scuppered Newcastle's second summer transfer window under new ownership. Going into the summer, there was talk about selling Isak or Guimaraes in order to abide by financial rules. To their credit, they avoided that, but instead they were forced to sell perhaps their two most exciting talents, Elliot Anderson and Yankuba Minta. They got decent money for the two, yes, but losing young players like that is not a sustainable model. Their incomings also don't excite me. Lewis Hall is a good player, but they overpaid considerably. Vlachodimos is a huge overpay for a mediocre backup keeper, and William Asula is a complete unknown after failing to score in 21 Premier League games for Sheffield United last year. Lloyd Kelly on a free is their only certifiably good piece of business, and even he isn't a guarantee for a team competing in Europe. I still back Newcastle for a good season, but this transfer window will not be the reason why. 19th, Leicester City. Leicester tried to save their window on deadline day, bringing in Bilal El-Khanous and Odsonne Edouard, but I'm still skeptical about their summer efforts. Securing the services of last season's Lone Star Fatawu is undoubtedly their best move, but large outlays on Oliver Skipp and El-Khanous pose real risks. Mostly though, I'm concerned about their goal scoring and their central defender core. Former Atalanta centre-back Caleb Akoli could be a hit, but he'll need to be with the shaky Wout Faes and Yannick Vestergaard in defense right now. Meanwhile, Edouard, El-Khanous, Bobby De Cordova-Reid, and Jordan Ayew are all attacking-minded players who are not proven goal threats. Their loan signing of Facundo Buonanotte and a well-priced sale of Kieran Dewsbury Hall are the highlights of their summer. 18th, Brentford. Quietly, Brentford have had a disappointing transfer window. The Liverpool duo of Sepp van den Berg and Fabio Carvalho could be fun signings, but neither have proven their worth in the Premier League to justify a combined €50 million spend. Getting $40 million for Ivan Toney in the last year of his deal is a good return, but they should have sold a year ago at peak value. His replacement, Igor Thiago, also doesn't have the same skill set and needs to make a big step up from the Belgian top flight. I don't know much about Gustavo Nunez or Jadon Magoma, but they're also unknown quantities. I think they'll be safe from relegation if their existing squad stays healthy, but I could see them going down in the next few years if they can't turn over the squad more effectively. 17th, Chelsea. An angry horde of Chelsea fans is screaming somewhere right now about how much young talent they've brought in and how well they've sold unwanted players, and there are some fair points to be made in defense of Chelsea's window. But in my opinion, their scattergun approach is ill-advised. Smart business like Renato Vega, Tosin Adarabioyo, and Pedro Neto is offset by odd choices, like adding Kieran Dewsbury Hall and Joao Felix to a crowded attacking midfield space, already occupied by better players than Cole Palmer and Christopher Nkunku. Why pay for another backup keeper when you have 5 of them on your books already? Bringing in more young players who won't play on big wages only works as Chelsea continues to sell academy products like Maatsen, Gallagher, Hall, and Hutchinson for big money, all of which are decent sales, but eventually the talent pool will dry up. Older players who are still at the club are also depreciating in value every day. Raheem Sterling, Armando Broja, Kepa, and Ben Chilwell were once £50 million players who are now being shopped around on loan. The same fate could befall Chukwuemeka, Ugochukwu, Penders, Kellyman, and any number of their young players, all of whom were bought for far above market value. It can't be denied that Chelsea have good squad depth, but if I were in their club leadership, I'd be sounding the alarms on our transfer strategy. 16th, Crystal Palace. Watching the Crystal Palace project start to die is absolutely heartbreaking. It's not even like they didn't get good money for their 2 primary outgoings, Michael Olise and Joachim Andersen, but it's the feeling around the club that has me so down on their business. Just as soon as they were going in the right direction, 2 essential players were gone. Not even 1 full season under Ollie Glasner to try pushing towards the European spots. Greedily selling Anderson also prevented them from getting a huge haul from Mark Gay, which could have been parlayed into 2 or 3 promising players. I'm more neutral about their incomings, Nketiah, Riyadh, and the loan of Chalobah in particular, but I'm neutral about Lacroix and Kamada, and pretty negative about Turner and Sarr. Getting decent money for Johnston and Ayew doesn't make me more bullish about their window as a whole, although maybe I'm being harsh because of my hopes for the club. 15th, Southampton. I'm pretty confident that Southampton are getting relegated, so I had one eye on how their squad building prepared them for life back in the Championship. On that metric, I think they beat out fellow promoted side Leicester. Harwood Bellis, Downs, Archer, Diaz, and Sugawara could all stick around if they do go down, while Ramsdale is certainly an upgrade on their current keeping options. I'm just not sure that they got their money's worth on a more than €100 million outlay, especially since they didn't match that with sales. They did get some good funds from the sales of Carlos Alcaraz and Sekou Mara, but then again, those were two of their more promising young players. It's an average window for the South Coast club. 14th, Aston Villa. This was a crucial summer for Villa, coming off the back of an overachieving Champions League berth. They brought in 8 players, including big spends on Amadou Onana and Ian Maatsen. I like but don't love both players, which is a knock against Villa, but less expensive incomings like Jadon Philogene and Samuel Illing Jr. could come good in the long term. Sales of Moussa Diaby and Douglas Luiz represent good value, and they did shift on a few older names and younger players on loan. Unfortunately, I don't think Villa strengthened enough in the short term to take advantage of the pull that Emery and Champions League football should have garnered. I still like their team and I'm glad they didn't go for big name signings, but I am left a little underwhelmed. 13th, Everton. Everton have had a dreadful start to the new campaign and have plenty of issues that will not be immediately solved by their transfer window. But for once, I think the notoriously impatient club have spent smartly in several markets. O'Brien and Njai on permanence are both decent moves, and I'd like to see more development from Irugbona before I make a decision on him. Making more than €80 million on Onana, Godfrey, and Dobbin keeps them in the green, and I don't think the losses weaken their squad too drastically. The real coups, though, are getting Lindstrom, Broja, and Mangala on loan for the season, all of whom could fill pressing holes in midfield and attack. To have made money while bringing in both short and long-term replacements in important areas is a good window, although I think they could use more defensive reinforcements, especially at fullback. 12th, Nottingham Forest. Forest absolutely love the transfer window, where they tend to bring in dozens of players in their best Chelsea impression. This year, it was a measly 11 permanents and loans, only one of which is a big spend, on Newcastle's Elliot Anderson. The sensible signings of Nikola Milenkovic and a whole bunch of relatively obscure young players at market value are in direct contrast to their previous transfer windows, and bringing in Ward-Prowse and Moreno on loan can help in the short-term relegation battle. They also got great returns on Niakate and Vlachodimos. I don't understand their dislike of Remo Freuler, but outside of that, it was a more normal and competent transfer window from Nottingham Forest, even though they likely will send out half of their incomings in the new year. 11th, Fulham. I keep going back and forth on Fulham. Did they pay a premium on a few players? Undoubtedly, but an element of sports commentary is going out on a limb, and I think some of their swings will come good. Emil Smith-Rowe just needs his chance. Joachim Anderson's return should be a seamless Tosin replacement, and Jorge Cuenca has considerable La Liga experience for a young center back. I think Sander Berge is an overpay and not a direct Paulinho replacement, and Sessegnon and Nelson will likely be rotational pieces at best, but they were just a free and loan respectively. The sales of Paulinho and Stansfield are strong, although they did lose several rotational pieces on freeze. Overall, I've just got a good feeling about Fulham's window. 10th, Liverpool. It looked like Liverpool were going to sit on their hands after missing out on their holding midfielder target for the second consecutive summer, but they ended up making 2 great moves, bringing in Mamardashvili and Chiesa for very reasonable fees. Signing only those 2 players represents Liverpool's excellent management, which never bends their pragmatic policy. The sales of Sepp van den Berg and Fabio Carvalho uphold that same commitment, as they are 2 players who were given chances on loan before Liverpool decided to get good value when it presented itself. No, it's not the type of window that a team aspiring to win the biggest of trophies might have, which is why they're not higher, but it won't set them back, and as mentioned, both signings will eventually contribute. 9th, Manchester City. From one top club to another, Manchester City likewise only brought in 2 players, Savinho and Gundogan, who I would assess as equally excellent moves. Savinho for $25 million will be a real steal when he's worth triple that in just a year's time, and we all know that Ilkay Gundogan has title-winning quality. The Citizens outdo the Reds though, because they managed to get $75 million for Alvarez, and a combined $50 million for the unwanted Cancelo and unproven Harwood Bellis. Before Gundogan came in, I was a little concerned about their attacking options, but the Germans' return and Savinho's quick start have me more confident that the loss of Alvarez can be compensated for. My biggest worry at this point is the lack of a Rodri backup, but they fared well so far without him to start the season. If Haaland gets injured, they should have enough to make up for his absence, and that's a scary thought. 8th, Wolves. The Portuguese, Brazilian, and English contingent is strong at Wolves. Andre, Rodrigo Gomes, Pedro Lima, Carlos Forbes, and Tommy Doyle all came through the door, welcoming another era of young talent to the Molineux. Sam Johnston is a clever signing as well, as I think Jose Sa is one of the weaker keepers in the league and can do with some competition for his place. Andre is a passing hub from the base of midfield, and should help Wolves assert more control in games that become frenetic, like their recent thrashing at the hands of Chelsea. Strand Larson on loan should also help settle the center forward position, which has been rotating ever since Raul Jimenez went down with that nasty injury. More impressive even are their sales of Pedro Neto and Max Kilman for huge fees that should help them rebuild from a difficult financial period. If Wolves can stay up, they've done themselves a real service with this window. 7th, Bournemouth. Selling Dominic Solanke to Tottenham could be taken two ways. One, it's the sign of a club who needs funds and plans to sell on their best players with regularity. Two, and the explanation I prefer, is that Bournemouth plans to approach their business with a sustainable, savvy eye focused on consistent squad turnover and improvement. The last time they were in the Premier League, holding on to assets like Ryan Fraser and Callum Wilson for too long left them light in many areas across the pitch and cost them their place in the top flight. But with the sale of Solanke for top dollar, Bournemouth can afford to retool. And retool they did, bringing in experienced and still improving Porto striker Evan Nilsson for barely more than half of Solanke's price, leaving extra cash for young talents like Dean Huijsen and Julian Araujo to come in. Unal is a good backup center forward at the price as well. I'm less sold on Luis Sinisterra for almost $25 million, as they have plenty of wide players in their ranks, but at least he's a known commodity after a season on loan. I think last season was more than the flash in the pan for Bournemouth. 6th, Manchester United. After years of confusing business, I think Manchester United have gotten a transfer window right. They've bought young players who are familiar with the manager, who they decided to back, but will all be portable to other systems if Ten Hag does eventually get the boot. Xerxes could be formidable in a year or two, while Mazraoui and De Ligt are pretty surefire successes. I do think they've overpaid for Manuel Ugarte, but his passing, tackle and interception numbers, and his general youth and athleticism should make him at the very least a good Premier League midfielder. Lenny Yoro is the biggest swing of all, but he has as much experience as you could possibly have as an 18-year-old center back, and barring a crazy development, the worst case scenario would be a small loss on a future sale, while best case he becomes a top-tier regular. United's sales of McTominay, Greenwood, Wan-Bissaka, and Kambwala are exactly the type of moves that they need to be making to move on players and recoup some returns, while shifting off Martial, Van de Beek, and some unwanted young players will lighten up the squad for future incomings. It could still go wrong for the Red Devils, but light is on the horizon. 5th, Arsenal. If you're going to beat Manchester City to the title, you need elite depth to get through the long season. A few days before the end of the window, I would have said that Arsenal had failed to accomplish that, only having brought in Ricardo Calafiori and making David Raya's loan permanent. Both good signings, but in areas that didn't need huge improvements. But in the final hours, they swooped in for Raheem Sterling on loan and Mikel Merino on a permanent, adding to the two areas I felt needed some attention. Sterling is one of the best bench players for the title run you could ask for, and Merino is a great midfield rotation option who has the ability to do a little bit of everything. For once, Arsenal also got good returns on a few sales, notably getting club-high fees for Smith Rowe and Nketiah, and a good chunk back for the benched Aaron Ramsdale. Shipping out a number of unfavored squad players on frees and loans also keeps the squad content and rolling into a season that may be make or break in terms of a title charge. They didn't mortgage their long-term future either, but it's clear that the Gunners are in search of their first Premier League title in 20 years. 4th, Ipswich Town. Of the newly promoted sides, Ipswich have won the window. To me, their transfers are a perfect mix of ambitious and sustainable. They've created a squad good enough to fight for survival, but ready to succeed in the Championship next year if necessary. It was no secret that Ipswich had lots of low-level Championship and even League One talent in their ranks, so bringing in 12 players was a necessary evil. Nobody broke the bank though, and their biggest spends were on young players that I like. Amari Hutchinson, Jacob Greaves, Jack Clark, Dara O'Shea, and Liam Delap. They also sprinkled in Championship top scorer Sammy Smodics, relegated standouts Chiedozie Ogbene and Arjnet Muric, loaned Calvin Phillips, and experienced Ben Johnson. They also have essentially all of their contributors from their high-flying promotion season, putting the trust in a handful of regulars, Sam Morsey, Leif Davis, and Luke Wolfenden among them. It's the type of window that every promoted side should aspire to have. 3rd, Tottenham. Moving into the podium places, and I've got perennial bottlers Tottenham Hotspur. Finally, most of the relics of the previous failed era have been shipped out of the club. Skip, Royale, Rodon, Lo Celso, Perisic, and Ndombele, Sessegnon, Dyer, and Tanganga are no longer in the dressing room. In their place, Dominic Solanke and a bunch of teenagers were brought in. Solanke, for his part, is coming off his best ever season at Bournemouth, and should be a great spearhead for Postecoglou's attack after he returns from a small injury. Archie Gray and Lucas Bergvall are the two big names of the youngsters, with Archie Gray's versatility and potential a real asset, while Bergvall was stolen from under the nose of a number of top clubs. I do think they overpaid a bit for Wilson Odobert, but I like the direction under Ange, and think that getting unwanted names out of the club, while not bringing in lots of short-term replacements, was a necessary step in this project. Next, we'll be fleshing out the squad further, but they're still 2 or 3 seasons behind the top teams in terms of their progression. Second, Brighton. Historically, Brighton is known for their shrewd spending on relatively unknown prospects from around the world. While this summer, they flexed their proverbial muscles and brought in 8 young players from 8 different leagues to shore up their side after a slightly disappointing season. The only transfer that I even question slightly is more than $45 million spent on Jorginho Rutter, who didn't look great his last time in the Premier League, but he doesn't even need to be an immediate success with just how much ability the Seagulls now have in attack. Incomings Rutter, Yankuba Minta, Brian Gruda, and Ibrahim Osman can be added to Mitoma, Adingra, Welbeck, March, and Ciso, Ferguson, and Pedro in the front line. While that might seem like a lot of players, I can see Brighton selling 1 or 2 of Mitoma, Ferguson, and Pedro next summer, and Welbeck isn't getting any younger. They also address some of their concerns in central midfield, with Matt O'Reilly and Mats Wiefer, while Ferdi Kagaoglu feels a bit of a luxury at left back alongside Pervis Estupiñán. It's tough to doubt Brighton though with their track record, so I'm a believer this season. First, West Ham. The Hammers have had us on strings before with their transfer business, but I can't help but love what they did this summer. Max Kilman is overpriced but reliable, as is Nicholas Füllkrug. I'd really like to see him start over Michail Antonio. Grabbing Manchester United's out-of-favor Wan-Bissaka and young winger Luis Guilherme are also exciting moves, but my favorite transfers they made are the acquisition of Crescencio Somerville, free transfer of Guido Rodriguez, and loan of Jean-Claire Todibo. These are exciting signings for a team looking to push up the table, and balance short and long-term planning well. Sales of Downs, Benrahma, and Kehrer recoup some money, while loaning a few players out keeps the squad from getting too bloated. If anything can be criticized, it's maybe whether they can get fees for some of the players who seem out of favor but still have market value. They'll need to get good money for Ward-Prowse and Aguerd, for instance. But you can't fault West Ham for taking some big swings in search of a successful new era under Lopetegui. Those are my rankings of every Premier League club's summer transfer window. Let me know whether you agree or disagree in the comments, and subscribe for weekly Premier League content.